All right, good evening, everyone. I am Javonslyn Dunnigan, owner of JMD Defense LLC, and I will be moderating this wonderful panel tonight. We have three ladies that are here to talk about their stories as survivors of an attack or a possible attack or an attempted attack is what I should say. So we have Natasha Magruder, Danielle Horn, and Mallory Lockett, and each of them will tell their stories. And throughout this time, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat and I will try to interject them. Or of course, towards the end, we'll get a chance, hopefully, to answer some of your questions. So let's start off with introductions. We'll go first with Natasha. Why don't you introduce yourself to our audience?
Good evening, everybody. My name is Natasha Magruder. I was born and raised in Chicago, and I've been terrified of guns my whole life until 2019 when I took the Intro to Firearms and the Conceal and Carry class. And the first time I ever shot a weapon was my conceal and carry. And now I don't know what took me so long to do it.
Okay. Well, thank you. Danielle, introduce yourself, please.
Yes, hi everyone. My name is Danielle, and I'm originally from Los Angeles, California, but I have been in Chicago the last 7 years or so. Let's talk about guns, I guess. So I've always loved shooting guns. I've shot automatic weapons, machine guns, and different things, but it's always been at like a facility or outdoor program. So I've never had to actually manage loading the weapon or learn good firearm care. So that's why I went to the gun club and I'm now a gun club member. And so now not only can I have fun shooting guns, but it could also be a protective resource for me as well.
Excellent. Very good point. All right, Mallory, introduce yourself, please.
Hi, my name's Mallory Lockett. I currently live in Chicago. I am from Chicago. In between that time, I have spent most of my adulthood in the DC metro area. And even in the late 80s, there was an anti-handgun law that I voted for in Maryland when I was living there at the time. So it's been a long journey to go from being very anti-gun to now being pro-protection, even if that involves using a gun.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Mallory. So we definitely want to hear a little bit about some of your activism when you tell your story. So Natasha, you had a situation on a bike trail. If you could tell us about what happened, where the bike trail was located. A lot of times we think of bike trails in the suburbs, and I think your situation was in a city. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
So this happened on March 2nd. I was walking on the Chicago bike path, and this was right about 67th and South Shore Drive. A young man approached from the opposite direction, and I didn't think anything of it at the time because from a distance, he was moving at a steady pace and just looked like a fellow jogger. But as he got closer, he told me he needed help. And so, I kind of looked and just said, hey, I can't help you, and tried to keep moving, but I was on alert. And as I looked him up and down, I noticed he had on nice clothes, but he didn't have on shoes and socks. It's March and it's like 45 degrees outside. So I didn't really have anything of value, but even if I did, I'm not going to go rifling through any bags, or I wasn't even interested in what help he might need. I just knew I didn't want to help him and I wanted him to stay away from me. So I told him again, I can't help you. I put my hands up. I forcefully told him to stay back, but he kept trying to close the gap between us. So I'm consistently trying to move maybe forward and then wide. And I'm right into traffic if I run out into the streets. And so I grabbed my mace and I said, I will mace you, stay back, stay away from me. But he kept trying to come towards me. And I finally yelled, this is your final warning. And I made a motion with my hand so that he could see I was taking the safety off that mace and was kind of putting myself in a defensive position. And he came towards me again. And I was like, okay, he must be on drugs. I'm not exactly sure what's going on. But at that point, I was afraid that if I maced him, it was just going to enrage him and he was going to charge and, I might end up on my back or whatever. I decided at that point to switch the mace from my right to my left hand and cleared my clothes to draw my weapon. And just as I touched the butt of my weapon, I happened to look up and see the police coming. So I'd hopped and I'm jumping, jumping around, waving my hands to get the attention of the police officers. They pull over. And as the police officer exits the vehicle, this would-be assailant yells, "This crazy woman's trying to mace me." And he charges the police car, opens the door, hits her with the car, and then takes off running. If I hadn't been there, I wouldn't have believed this story. It was crazy. Ultimately, he was caught, and because he didn't touch me, I didn't press charges. But when I got home, I looked at the Citizens app and realized that someone was beaten and robbed right across the street from my building about 45 minutes before my incident. So I called a friend that I have on the police department and found out that that assailant was not wearing shoes.
Mm-hmm.
And, I just feel like the odds of that being two different people are very slim. So I'm glad that it turned out the way it did and that the police stopped and, helped me out. So that's my story.
Okay, and it's a lot more to it, but I definitely want to get to the next two stories, and I'm gonna follow up with you on several great things that I heard that you did to help people as they may be faced with a similar situation. So Danielle, tell everyone what happened to you with your carjacking that occurred.
Okay, last year at the start of the year, I was a victim of a carjacking. It was early in the morning, I would say anywhere between 7 and 7:30 a.m. So really early with the early risers, and I was getting ready to take my daughter to daycare. And so as I entered the main road, which from where I am is 47th Street, I noticed two cars driving erratically and driving through red lights and driving really fast. I kept going on about my journey, not thinking anything of it. And then once I reached a closer destination to my daughter's daycare, I saw those same two cars again. And that I did start to stop and think in that moment, like, what is going on here? Like, why do I see these two cars again? And at this point, they were blocking the small residential road. So they were idling in the street, talking to each other through the windows. So I literally had to wait for one of them to clear the road for me to continue going through. So I'm assuming at that point, they clearly had a direct shot at me, noticed that I was a woman by myself in my vehicle, and thought that I would be an easy target. Mm-hmm. And so as I continued on to my daughter's daycare, again, had two signs to kind of think like, maybe I should stop or maybe I should pivot. But I continued to press forward because this is my everyday lifestyle and nothing has happened to me thus far. So I get to my daughter's daycare and I do all of my morning rituals outside of the car. So I'm putting facial oil on her, getting her chapstick together, masking her, putting jackets on, just all of these things that now looking back, I do in the house or not at all. But I'm doing all of these things hanging outside of my car, just taking my sweet, precious time, and then get her into daycare eventually. The moment I step back and get into my car, I'm immediately blocked in by the same two vehicles. So they pull up, block me in, and it was literally like a movie after that. So they open the door, they start reaching for their stuff and hop out the car. And I'm like, okay, I'm about to be robbed. So I just hopped out the car. I was like, at that point, I did not have any type of weapons. I did not have a concealed carry. I didn't even carry pepper spray or mace. So I was like, I'm getting out of this car and they can have it. And so that's what I did. I got out of the car and they immediately, it was about 4 to 5 young Black men that surrounded me and was asking me, where are the car keys? Where is this? Snatched my purse off of my possession. And then one of them jumped in my car. And then of course they split throughout the remaining cars and drove off. It was really traumatic, to say the least. And then another parent was a bystander watching because, again, we're all dropping our children off for daycare. So she had actually phoned in the initial call, but she had sped off because she had her daughter in the backseat. So when she finally makes her way back to the daycare, she's apologizing to me like, I'm so sorry. I wish I could have done something, but I had my daughter and I had to get out of there. And I'm like, girl, your baby is your first priority. I'm glad that you called in because that allowed the police to get there that much quicker. Because by the time I made it into the house and everything and got my thoughts and my blood pressure and everything else down to speak to the police, it would have definitely been further delayed. But just looking back on some things that I definitely would have done differently. First,
Danielle, hold that thought.
Okay.
Hold that thought. Hold that thought. I want Mallory to tell her story, and then we're definitely going to go into some things that you would have done differently. Okay. Mallory, let's hear your story.
I'm glad you guys survived, first and foremost. And back in 2005, so that's roughly 16 years ago or so, almost 16 years ago, on my birthday. I'm born November 3rd, and I had gone out with my friends and my then current boyfriend to celebrate my birthday, and came home around 10 o'clock that evening. My ex-boyfriend had hid my home, broke in, hid my home, and long story short, he attacked us both. He had a handgun. He shot and murdered my current boyfriend, John. He stabbed him 19 times. He also stabbed and shot me and took off. And fortunately, he was caught and he's now doing life in prison. When we initially entered the home, I had gone immediately upstairs because I had to go to the washroom. And I'm literally pulling up my underwear and my ex burst into the bathroom. And I was so confused, like, what are you doing here? And then I looked down at a gun, and I'm not sure, looking back, if I started laughing or not, because it looked like a toy gun. I'm so unfamiliar with guns. I didn't know that firearms could actually be that small unless it's a toy gun. And so that's when he shot at me. And at the time, I didn't realize that I had actually been shot. I didn't know what was happening. I thought I had been grazed, maybe. I was just unsure. I was just kind of knocked unconscious, or actually not unconscious. I think I was just in shock. And he went downstairs, and that's when it's a long story, but essentially that's when he murdered John. And then he came back upstairs to finish the job. I called the police because I had my cell phone with me. And I remember them telling me, don't get off the phone, etc. But he's coming back up the stairs. I'm getting off the phone. The smartest thing of this whole situation I could have done was get out of the bathroom, lay down, and play dead.
Mm-hmm.
So he still stabbed me, but he probably thought I was already dead and he was just going to stab, because that's what violent people do. So that's my story.
Wow. So yeah, it kind of leaves you speechless. And all three of your stories left me speechless when I first heard them. And that is obviously the reason I wanted you all to share your stories with other ladies, because not just because of the shock value, but to share it with other individuals, because there are a lot of lessons that we can learn from all of this, right? And you all can certainly share your experiences. And so let's start with you, Natasha. A couple of things that I wanted to ask about was the gentleman that tried to attack you. What was his size? What was his age? Was he considerably shorter or smaller than you, or taller than you?
He was about he was between 5'10" and 6 feet, and I'm 5'5". He was young, and I would say no more than 25.
Okay.
He was in fit condition. He wasn't, he looked clean. That's the only thing that I kept focusing on when I was telling my police officer friend. You get a feel for who's been on the street. And you know, when I looked at him and saw how clean his outfit was in comparison with him not having shoes on, the first thing in my mind was, he is waiting for somebody to spin the block. They saw me walking and they're going to either beat me, rob me, snatch me into a van. Like, those were all of the things that were going on in my mind at that point, because there weren't a lot of people out, because it's 45 degrees. So I'm the only nut job aside from him walking on the lake at, you know, in March. But those were the things that struck me when I looked at his feet were not dirty. So in my mind, I was thinking, he has a partner. He took off his shoes to say he needs help. And, you know, that was not Jeffrey Dahmer. Who was the other guy that convinced people that he needed help? He always had a brace on or something like that. That was what was in my mind. It's just, you know, this is a ruse to get me to let my guard down. And I wasn't going to do that.
So what was interesting about your story, even when you sent me the email, you were incredibly descriptive in your email. And clearly you could have had time to sit and think and write all of it out. But what I think is important for our listeners to understand is that you need to look at people so that you can give a description if necessary. Something, what we may call our spidey senses, went up when the guy approached you. So you knew something didn't seem right. Like you said about, you know, it's obvious you out in 45-degree weather without shoes on. But one of the things I just want to ask you about that I thought was really interesting in your entire approach, you had a firearm on you, but you did not go for your firearm first. Firearms should be a last resort, and you did have mace on you, and all the steps. If you could talk about all the methodical steps that you went through, because that's what's really going to be important for people to understand. Your gun should not be the first thing you pull.
So the reason, well, I always walk with mace on me. And since that incident, I actually went to Amazon and bought a little Velcro strap that just straps around my hand so that I don't have to reach in my pockets for it. And the thought process was, if I get pushed, it's still going to be stuck to my hand and I'll be able to use it. But to me, firearms is a last resort. I don't, you know, even though this man may have meant me harm, I'm not fighting crime. I'm not out here to, yeah, all I want to do is defend myself. And if you leave me alone with just me saying no, then we can both go on about our days. So I initially said no and didn't even have the mace in my hand. And when he was undeterred, he, in my mind, he was escalating. And so I needed to follow suit to keep myself safe and protected. And so that's when I told him I had mace. I showed him that I had mace, and it was just a systematic step. Like, you're meeting me step by step, and I'm trying to continue to create distance, and you're trying to close it, which is making me even more fearful. I'm a woman, and you know, any man that is decent, even if they're just trying to talk to you, is going to say, oh, you know, I'm sorry, I have a sister, I have a mom and aunt, whatever. He was not that person. And the other thing that I think about, and I take having a firearm and carrying a firearm very, very seriously. But the other thing that I think about is, if I pull it, I'm going to have to use it. And that's a weighty responsibility, because I would have taken his life that day. And I think, you know, as I sent the email to you and as I talked to some friends and family, that's when I became a basket case. Like, in the moment, I was like, yeah, whatever, he's getting ready to get shot. But it's not, you know, it isn't, it's way more serious than that. And it's such a hefty responsibility. So I'm glad that I did go through all of those steps instead of just, you know, pulling my gun.
Okay.
Encounter.
And I think you did a great job just methodically thinking about how you were going to defend yourself, even with your language, the verbal language, giving him verbal commands. And they say the louder and the more forceful you can be, it can deter some people sometimes, right? So Danielle, let's talk about something you said that stands out always to me is you saw them the first time, didn't think anything of it, saw him the second time, but you kept pushing forward. And so we do that a lot. We see something doesn't feel right, or we get a reminder in our mind to say, go back into the house and pick up the keys. And then we later on find out that we need that key. So tell me a little bit about what, as you thought backwards, as you backtracked and thought about, all the warning signs, what did you take away from that?
One, don't think it can't be you. I think that's the biggest thing, is like, you never think this can be me. I mean, I've been living in Chicago for 7 years, never had an incident, despite what other people may say about Chicago. So you kind of become numb to different things that are happening outside of the world or outside of your environment. So even though I had those warning signs, I was like, nothing's gonna happen. I'm here every day. And so taking that for granted, and now realizing it can happen to you, it has happened to you, and it possibly could happen again in the future. And so being prepared if you were to ever be put in that situation again. And so that's what I did after that, start to get prepared. And now I feel like if I am in a situation like that again, I would be able to handle myself differently. However, with the amount of men, I would probably still give them the car.
Yeah.
When you're looking at 4 to 5 men with guns at different angles, I am not a CIA agent or a sharpshooter by any means. So even if I did have a weapon on me, that would not have been something I would have been able to properly use in that situation.
And Danielle, let me just ask a question. Do you recall seeing the guys with the firearms, if their finger was on the trigger, or were they just alluding to, I have a firearm?
Yeah, I did not focus on if their finger were on or off the trigger in
But
that
you did
moment.
see firearms.
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
And the reason I bring that up is a lot of times with carjackings, people think that I can pull my gun faster and I can shoot them faster, but the bad guy always has their finger on the trigger. That's generally how they're taught. They're not thinking about trigger discipline, which is what we try to teach people, to take their finger off the trigger until they're ready to shoot. So one more thing I just want to ask you, Danielle, with this, and then I want to move on to Mallory. Do you go a different route now, or when that carjacking occurred, did you go the same route every day to the daycare?
Same route every day. Now I do switch it up a little bit. My dad always says, you never know who's watching you. Now, granted, in this situation, I do not feel like I was personally being followed. However, they were out in the morning looking for a target and they found one. So now I do switch up my route, and I'm just very aware of my surroundings. Like, I stay in the rear view mirror. If something's looking iffy and I'm parked, like, I'm already like preparing myself, like, if this situation can go, if this goes a different route, I'm already prepared. I'm already in the mental state of preparedness, just because I'm so much more observant now. I also move so much quicker. I am warp speed in and out of my car. One of those old practices of having your keys already in your hand, ready to go, get in the house. I definitely do all of those things now, and I have not let my guard down.
Bravo, bravo. All right. Mallory, so your story, thank God you survived your harrowing experience as well. We certainly, may John rest in peace. So when you mentioned it, when he came into the bathroom, you noticed the firearm, and you thought it was a toy, right? And they are small and they can be big, but something made you laser focused. Did he have the gun focused on you, or was it just kind of like down to his side?
He had the gun focused on me, and I would like to backtrack a bit. Initially, he had the gun. He ushered me out of the bathroom, down the stairs where John was. John was still alive at that time. And even then, as I was going down the stairs, I was always thinking of how can I escape? So as soon as I hit the bottom stairs, my keys were on the table, and I grabbed the keys and I said, John, run. And he ran out of the house, and he ran. I don't even want to give him his name. The person ran after us. And so we're out in the parking lot. I lived in a townhome community in Virginia at the time, and he caught up with us and he told us to get back in the home. And I think this is something maybe um, maybe more women are inclined to do. I'm thinking, oh my God, he has a gun. I have neighbors everywhere. What if someone comes out accidentally, he gets spooked and he shoots them? And so I'm thinking, I don't want anyone else to get hurt. So when he told us to go back in the home, I'm like, okay. And John actually said, don't go back in.
Mm.
And I just didn't feel that that I had a choice. Else more people would, perhaps get harmed. So we go back in. He immediately hits me with the gun. I fall to the floor. He then sits back on the stairs. He makes John sit in the chair. And while I'm on my knees, I'm still thinking of a plan. So I start crawling from my knees. As you can see, there's someone coming. I'm hyper aware of my surroundings right now, and I'm actually I stepped out from attending a party at a hotel. The valet staff know that I'm here. I'm let that be clear, and that's because of my experience. People know where I am. Anyway, so as I'm on my knees, I started crawling toward him because he had placed a gun on the stair beneath him. So he's sitting on the stairs. I'm on the gun is on the stair beneath him. As soon as I got close enough, I grabbed the gun, but slid it toward John. The only reason why I did that was because I had no familiarity with handguns. And I did not think, first of all, I didn't know if it was truly loaded or not. I didn't know if I would have time in that split second to shoot him, which I am so sure I would have. And I knew that John had grown up with guns. And so he didn't realize, I'm not sure if he realized what was going on. The person then attacked John. I ran upstairs to call the police, and then that's when he came in and shot me, etc. I went back downstairs, stabbed John, and then came back upstairs to stab me. So that's the full story. You were saying?
So I was just going to say, I remember, and I thank you because you do a video for our intro to excuse me, our intro to firearms class. And people, I'm sure, are always wondering. I always tell them she survived the attack. She's happily married now. But there was something wonderful that came out of tragedy where you were involved with some legislation as an activist. But before we get to that, Mallory, I do want to mention something that stands out is that Mallory said she didn't know how to use that firearm. And I always tell people at the very basic level, you want to know how to at least pick up the gun, determine if this firearm is loaded, and shoot it if necessary, or if it jams, to know what to do. So as much as I don't want to push firearms on anyone, this is the very reason why we have the intro class and why it's necessary for everyone to learn something very basic about firearms. So Mallory, why don't you tell us really quickly what you did to make a change, what good came out of this tragedy?
Former Vice President candidate Tim Kaine, Senator Tim Kaine, also was once upon a time the mayor of Richmond and the governor of Virginia. And he and his wife are very pro women protection. They're very anti-domestic violence. So there is a law, or there is a process called VINE. I think it's victim identification, something. But what you can do is, if you have someone that's incarcerated, you keep tabs on them. So you can always find out, what their status is, if they're still in prison, if they're dead or transferred or whatever. So, and that's to protect victims. Another thing that I did, particularly in Virginia, was go to the police academy and speak to police officers. And you'd be surprised at how little survivors do. As soon as I was well enough, the first thing I did was go to roll call at the precinct near my home and thank the police officers. There were people who had been on the force for decades. They had never had anyone come and thank them. And I wanted to do that because who knows where I'd be if they had not shown up. And I think also there needs to be, when they see you in a domestic violence situation, they're seeing you at your worst. You're almost not a person anymore. You know, you are truly just a victim. And I wanted them to say, hey, this is a person who has a life, who has a son, you know, who is grateful for protection, and let them know that they are appreciated for, you know, helping in that instance.
Wow. Bravo. I mean, I'm really proud of the work that you're doing, because that does help victims. And I'm sure that as much bad press, even though that was years ago, it's a thankless job for police officers. Not all of them are bad. And I'm just glad that it worked out, not just for you, but for them, because domestic calls are the most dangerous for police officers and first responders.
Exactly.
They really
And
are.
one reason why the police, as I understand it, are so cautious when they do that is because they have no idea what they're walking into. Unfortunately, the person that's being abused will often think that the police are the enemy. So then you have the attacker and the person that's being abused against the police. And who, you know, if I were a police officer, I would think twice about those situations as well. So I wanted them to, you know, think 3 times and,
Right.
you know, perhaps help.
Okay. Well, thanks, Mallory, for sharing that. Natasha, you mentioned that there's some follow-up information. One of the things that I just wanted to ask about, do you have any regrets that you didn't press charges against this gentleman? Maybe if he continued to commit crimes, I don't know if you know that, but I'm just wondering, do you have any regrets about not pressing charges?
I don't have any regrets about not pressing charges. And I'm Mallory and Danielle. I just want to take a minute to say I'm so glad that both of you guys survived and that you've shared your stories with us, because they're harrowing. You know, when I think back on, even though we all have kind of different situations that happened, we all survived in the best way we could, as women do, and Black women especially, and we're moving forward. Lynn, back to your question about pressing charges, because he didn't touch me, I felt like there was, you know, I don't know what he wanted to do. And ultimately, all he was asking for is help. But just because he was asking didn't mean I had to give it. So in this instance, I don't feel badly about pressing charges, but the follow-up is my friend that's on the police force happens to be friends with the detective who was working the case where the woman actually was attacked. And I did let them know that if they needed an additional witness or if they needed someone to come and speak, that I was certainly more than willing to do that. Unfortunately, that victim stopped responding to the detective's call, so I'm not exactly sure what happened with that young man. I do know that I did find out through my friend that he has some mental challenges and he lives with his mom or something. He was off his meds. But I also, like Mallory, in that moment, thanked the police officers. Once everything had settled, I didn't want to leave the area because I didn't know if they were going to catch him or not. And again, I didn't know what was going on, even though I was maybe no more than 2 blocks from my home. I didn't want to walk through the neighborhood knowing that this person could still be out there. So I stayed and waited until it was safe for me to go back home. The police officers did ask me if I wanted to press charges, and I told them no, but I also offered to be a witness to them because he did hit one of the officers with the door. And I did just thank them profusely. I was like, you know, you guys get a bad rap. Thank you so much for stopping. I wanted to say I almost shot that fool, but you know, I didn't want to have any unnecessary attention on myself. But yeah, I think, you know, just based on how things happen, if he had touched me, absolutely, I would have pressed charges.
Smart lady, you didn't tell them that you would have shot him. Did you? So you never pulled your gun out of the holster, but you almost did.
That's correct. My hand was on the butt of my weapon. My shirt was up and my hand was on ready to draw. And
Okay.
as I was doing that, I looked up and saw the police coming down the street. And that's when I went crazy, hopping on the curb to try and get their attention.
So one of the things that I just want to ask, and I want to be clear on, you had your gun on your body. So it wasn't in a purse, it wasn't in a fanny pack or a backpack or anything like that.
No, 95% of the time, my weapon is on my body. Very
Okay.
rarely is it in a purse, but I have a billion holsters now, and there is no outfit that I can't be armed in.
Excellent, excellent. That is music to my ears, because I stress it so much, and you'll hear it in the gun club, because if an attack occurs, and they're coming for your purse, right? But in your situation, you needed to draw quickly if it continued to escalate. And we'll talk about that draw from concealment class, where you learned some of those methodical steps, and I'm just really proud of how you went about that. But I want you to share that. Danielle, let me just ask a quick question. One thing that was really, really great, unfortunately, I say great, but what was great about what the young people did in this carjacking is they waited for you to go into the daycare. And then when you got out of the daycare, they blocked your car in. So one of the things that I've heard the police say, I've kind of asked the question, why are they taking two cars, and why is it 4 and 5 people? And they said because they know more and more civilians have concealed carry firearms. Okay,
Wow.
so and that's one of the reasons why they're trying to ambush everyone. So Danielle, what would you have done differently, if anything, if you had had a firearm? What do you think would have? And I'm not advocating, because you might not have been able to pull your firearm fast enough, but what would you have done differently? Had you thought about that?
Yeah, I wouldn't have pulled my firearm. So even, looking back, that's not something I would have done. However, I have added to my defense arsenal. So you ladies heard me speaking a little bit earlier, but I purchased a German Shepherd. He's a protective German Shepherd. He's currently 7 months, but he's going through the full course of attack work, carjacking scenarios where he is attacking in the vehicle when someone is approaching. Like, he is going to be that first level of defense if anyone approaches my vehicle. He rides around with me. And then he's just looking at him. He's a deterrent. I mean, he's 7 months now and people cross the street. So I just added to my defense arsenal. So I've gotten the German Shepherd. I've gotten my concealed carry. I now carry mace on me, just so that I have options when I'm put in a situation. Or I hope that I'm not. But if I am, I have multiple levels of defense now.
That's again, I'm sorry, that's again music to my ears, that you have thought about some things that you can do, and it's not always the firearm. People go straight to a gun, and that's not always the best answer. It may be the final answer, but it's not always the best answer, because the worst thing is for someone to take the firearm and shoot you while you're trying to defend yourself or your family. So kudos to you. Who would have thought that a civilian would get? Now, we hear people get pit bulls for different reasons, and train them to be attacked, and they are deterrents for me, for sure. But a German Shepherd, they are normally law enforcement dogs. So you're doing exactly what law enforcement does, and I think that's a great suggestion for people, and maybe someone on this webinar may consider that. That's an excellent suggestion. So it's about 6:43. I do want to take a few questions. Natasha, if you could just tell us quickly how you went about the process of drawing your firearm. We know the steps you went through in your mind, but there were some things that you have to do, and it's not easy when you are in a concealed state, because you should not be able to see anyone's firearm, so you have to do something. So just tell us quickly what goes into having a concealed firearm on your body and having to draw it.
Yep. So in this case, and when I'm walking or running, I think it's Comfort Tech from Amazon.
A belly band?
Yes, the belly band. And you can twist it around your waist to to put it in whatever position you like best. My favorite position is probably the 1 o'clock. So that's where my weapon was. I always have a loose fitting shirt or something over to make sure that I'm not printing. And honestly, since I took the concealed carry class, what Greg taught us was that you have to be cognizant of grabbing everything away from your weapon so that you're not catching on any loose clothing or whatever. So when I'm walking, it's a mantra for me. Mace, it's mace, pull, draw. And that's just always me telling myself, you got your mace in your hand. And as I'm walking, I'm using my thumb to flip it and unflip it. So I can do that unconsciously. And then the same thing when I'm at home, sometimes when I'm practicing with my unloaded weapon, of course, is just in different outfits and in different carry positions, always knowing where it is and always knowing how to clear those articles of clothing so that I can draw straight up and point out.
Excellent. Excellent. Okay. Ladies, one question is in here, and then we'll open it up if people have questions. Just put them in the chat. And then, of course, I want you all to think about some tips and advice that you would give people as we wrap up in a little bit. So one of the questions someone asked is, was it legal to have your firearm on Park District property? So I can answer that question as an instructor. If you are on a bike trail and you're not on a bike trail where there are kids playing. So where the bike trail attaches to a park, the bike trail is fine. But when you get to the park area, and let's say you decide to sit down around the monkey bars and you rest, that is where it becomes illegal because kids and families are going to be playing in that area. But on a bike trail, you can have your firearm. Okay. So while I'm waiting on some other questions, Mallory, do you have any tips or advice for our audience?
If you believe that it is practical to know how to change a tire or mince garlic or blow dry your hair, it's practical to know how to use a gun. It's practical. I took the self-defense class with Lynn at JMD, and it's practical to know how to defend yourself, even if you don't want to necessarily use a gun. And that's what I would recommend wholeheartedly, because when you're in that moment of truth, when you truly believe that your life is in danger, that death is imminent, you're going to want to either know how to subdue that person or shoot that person dead. And I'd just like to say, I do have regrets. I regret that I did not know or that I did not trust that I could use that gun, because there is no doubt I would have used it and I would have saved myself and quite possibly have saved John.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Natasha, before you give some words of advice, one of the questions in the chat is, did you notify the police that you had a firearm when they were talking to you?
No, I did not. I didn't think that that was germane to my particular situation since I didn't draw, but I always have my concealed carry license on me and I have a photo of it in my phone. If the situation had escalated, obviously I would have done that. And I do have the USCCA insurance as well. So I have that card that kind of tells you what to do and gives you some instruction. But I did, I just put my hands up. It was so comical when I look back on it, the way that things happened, because he rushed over to the police car and as if he was getting ready to get in, like he was running from me. And he literally said, "That crazy bitch is trying to mace me." And I'm like, no, that wasn't what happened at all. But again, because I didn't, I said, well, I did tell him I was going to mace him. He wouldn't leave me alone.
So he never saw you. He saw you gesture like you were going to pull your gun, but he never saw your gun.
I'm not sure if he did or not. If he was looking at me, he would have seen it because my clothes were clear.
Okay. Okay.
And so at that point, it was visible.
And then last thing before you give your tips, did the police ever ask for your driver's license? Did they run your name or anything, or they just were talking to you?
No, they were just talking to me. They asked if I was okay, and they asked if I wanted to press charges, and just asked me to tell them what happened, how it started again.
Okay. And
So,
what and the way Natasha handled it is perfectly fine. Had she could have done it a different way and said, "Hey, officers, I am a concealed carry permit holder. I am armed, so I just want you to know that as general reference." But nothing in the law says at that moment that you had to tell them. If they asked you because they ran your license, then you would have had to disclose it. But not you did everything correctly. So that's what the law says. If they ask you, you have to disclose it. But they didn't ask you. You didn't show your firearm. You didn't brandish it just to get him off of you. So any tips? So before we get to Danielle and wrap up?
yes, I would just like to say that as women, we're always taught to be polite and to be nice. And I think sometimes attackers use that to their advantage. No is a complete sentence. And when I'm out, especially when I'm out by myself, my answer to everything is just no. No, I can't help you. No. And forcefully, there is no smile there. My face says a lot, and I can make it very, very angry and determined in those situations. So for everybody, I would say, understand that no is a complete sentence, and you're under no obligation to help anyone that's asking for help if you don't want to do that. And just know that that's often a way for people to, it's Ted Bundy. I knew I would think of it. But that's a way for somebody to get your guard down and to take advantage of your kindness.
Absolutely. Okay, Danielle, I'm gonna let you have the final say with some tips and advice for everyone.
The two tips I would have is just always be capable of defending yourself. And when I say that, it's not only just having methods to defend yourself, but making sure you're in the right mental state to defend yourself. So as ladies, as we're going out and we're drinking or whatever it may be, you never know what may occur as you're out. So just always making sure that even if you're having a good time or you're enjoying yourself, that you are still mentally able, if needed, to defend yourself and or protect yourself. My other piece of advice would just be to listen to your sixth sense or your guardian angels or your ancestors, whatever you may consider it, listen to it and take a pause and just be observant of that sense and then make adjustments accordingly. It may only cost you a couple extra minutes out of your day, but it could have changed the entire outlook of your day. So just being mindful of the sixth sense that we do have and paying attention to it.
Okay. Can you all think of any other final words that you want to add? We have about 8 minutes. I don't see any other questions in here. Mallory, you have anything else to say?
Yes, I would say for those of you who are beginning to date someone, again, we as women, we're taught to give, people have to earn your trust. You don't give trust and let it be taken away. You make them earn it. So if you're dating someone, as a realtor, if I know of the person beforehand who's coming to see the home, I do a background check on them. And this is a complete stranger. So if I'm going to date someone, well, I'm not dating anyone now because I'm married, but when I first met him, I did a background check. Know who you're dating and don't think that you're being nosy or getting in someone's business or anything like that. Had I done that with the other person, I would have found out some things. I was trusting because he was the nephew of good friends of mine. But beyond a shadow of a doubt, go ahead and do the background check and don't feel guilty about it.
Okay. One of the questions was, does Mallory wish she had listened to John and stayed outside? Mallory, you can answer that if you choose to, but I just want to tell a little brief story about my cousin and what happened to her in Chicago. She lived in Chatham Club, and two guys, if you know where Chatham Club is, the houses, really, they don't have backyard fences. And so she was going into the alley. She saw about 4 or 5 guys, or maybe 2 guys at the very end of the alley. And she figured, oh, but something in her mind said, something didn't seem right, but she tried to get into her garage as quickly as she could. She got into the garage, and by the time she got out the car, they were right at the side door. They pointed a gun at her head, not knowing that she was the police. She was on medical leave at the time. And she said, they told her, get back in the car. And she said, nope, if you're going to shoot me right here. And she said she knew that her chances of survival were greater if she didn't go back, she didn't go with them. So I only say that to say that we all in life would have done some things a little bit differently. Obviously, Mallory said that, she wished that she had picked up the firearm and shot the firearm. But the thing is that my cousin said she knew that those guys would have kidnapped her. And once they found out she was the police, we know they would have killed her because, or maybe they would have let her go. Who knows? But Mallory, if you want to answer that, that's fine. But I just wanted to mention
Sure.
that because we all have, we have to go back and think about, some of our actions.
Sure, I'll answer it. I am a God-loving person. I didn't want anyone to be hurt. I was fearful that he might start shooting or that someone would come out and startle him and shoot that person.
Mm-hmm.
So no, I don't. What I wish is that he had not laid in wait and decided to be a criminal that day and kill John and almost kill me. So that's on him.
Exactly. Okay. Danielle or Natasha, any final comments? We have 4 minutes and then
I do.
Mhm.
I would just advise if you guys are not part of JMD Gun Club to either join and or find yourself of like-minded individuals. That has been super helpful for me being a part of the club because like when I have questions, I can just email her and she responds. It is the best because I just don't know. We are uneducated. And so having someone that is super educated on the topic and she is so quick to respond and let us know like, yes, you can do this. No, you cannot do this. This is the way you do this. It has been amazing. And then going to the gun range with other women and seeing us all shoot has been awesome. So just finding a group of individuals that are like-minded and practicing and care about good gun care, I think is really great when you're going on this journey. So.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
I would like to say that I echo Danielle's sentiments on JMD, and Lynn knows that I sing her praises and have referred several people. After my experience, she was one of the first people that I reached out to tell the story, but really to say thank you for the empowerment. Thank you for telling me that I can do this and then showing me the proper ways to do it. And the final thing that I would like to say is regardless of who you train with or where you go, just remember to continue to practice at home. I have a laser target here. I do go to the gun range on my own sometimes, and I am happily a new member and part of the gun club, so I can't wait for my first meeting. But even at home, I practice all the time. I am always handling my weapon. I am always loading and unloading the firearm. And I'm also always practicing my draw because it's muscle memory. You've got to practice those things. You've got to get familiar, and you have to always have a plan of how you're going to do something. It may not be the right plan, but at least in your mind, you know that you've got something to fall back on.
Thank you, ladies. And let me just say this to everyone that's listening. I certainly didn't ask them to plug the business, but what they are walking commercials because of their experience and what they've been doing on their own, trying to practice and calling to ask questions. That is one of the real benefits of the gun club. I would hate for something to happen and you haven't called to say, Lynn, can I do this or shouldn't I do this? I may not have the answers, but I definitely am going to contact someone to make sure I get the right answer. So I'm really proud of you all for the steps that you've taken. Mallory, I appreciate that date and that you called and said, I'm ready. I'm gonna join the gun club, but I'm not ready to go to the range yet. And that was a very mature statement because she has to be mentally ready to go to the range and deal with all that comes up when you go to the range. We had a lady that had a traumatic experience growing up with a gunshot. She had been shot, but she had buried it. And we did not know it until she was qualifying at the range. And she was having a panic attack. And I thought it was just simply she was nervous, and she started reliving what happened and had buried it all of those years. So everybody has a journey when it comes to firearms. I don't push it on anyone, but what I do say is we're here for you. So if you're interested, go to jmddefense.com, look at the website, see what we offer. And if you want to join a gun club, please do so. We have all kinds of classes because the focus is firearm education. So we have come to the end. I want to say thank you to my panelists for sharing and being transparent. This has been great. I know for everyone that's been listening, and it has been recorded, and so that will be uploaded for all to share, for those individuals that may have missed it or anyone else that you feel can benefit from it. Thank you all, and please be safe out there. Okay?
Be safe, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Thank you, Lynn. Thank you,
Thank you
ladies.
all. Take care.
Bye-bye.